I think the Office for Tax Simplification is pretty busy at the moment. They've got various consultations out on the simplification of capital gains tax and inheritance tax. And as you say, various commentators have suggested the possibility of an increase in CGT. Quite worryingly, the suggestion is that it would be at parity with income tax, which is where it was when I first started practicing. So I would say that a top rate of 20% for non-residential and 28% for residential property is fairly benign and generous. Other reliefs that might be on the hit list are the unlimited use of capital losses, rebasing on death, and principal private residence relief. Some people are calling changes to CGT like this a form of stealth wealth tax. It's difficult to say whether it's realistic, particularly, far-reaching reforms. For example, changes in tax rates. Ordinarily, this doesn't happen halfway through the tax year. So is the autumn budget really going to do that? But that said, I think there is precedent for as of midnight tonight. And we've seen that. Your team, Jonathan, have been extremely busy with
absolutely
changes, trying to get in there before they come in. So I mean, there might well be, change ahead. It's worth noting that with PPR, so principal private residence relief, changes to that would really penalise those who've been in properties for a long time and impact downsizers who want to release equity, release capital cash for their retirement. And it also can hamper people who want to move up the housing ladder, because how can they move up the housing ladder if there's a sizable tax bill when they sell their home? And so you might argue that changes of that nature, so getting rid of principal private residence relief, would in fact go against the stamp duty land tax holiday, in that it would slow down transaction levels. So possibly we would hope, and we've said this in our formal response to the government, that they would take time to consider the changes and possibly put the taxpayers on notice. Now that is CGT. You've asked about IHT, inheritance tax. What is at threat there? What would be an easy one for the government to go for and change? And possibly the 7-year rule around gifts of capital. They could extend it to a 10-year rule or even longer. And there have been this year reports, one produced by the All-Party Parliamentary Group, which has made recommendations for an immediate inheritance tax charge on lifetime gifts of 10 or 20%. So there's a lot to consider here, and there is an ongoing consultation, and it's quite complex. So I would say it wouldn't be too bold to say that we've got a long lead-in time on all of that. What you didn't mention, if I can bore you for a little bit longer.
Of course.
So wealth tax, this is really the tax that people have been talking about, thinking, how is the government going to pay for the COVID debt? They have to do something. And it was interesting that the FT Money section last week has introduced a survey for its readers and asking them numerous questions about wealth tax and the viewers' thoughts on whether it should be compulsory, whether it's annual, a one-off, what rate, what assets, should it be based on domicile, residence, citizenship. And it is a difficult tax. And I think realistically, it's not something that can just be brought in overnight. To put some context here, in 1990, 12 European countries had a wealth tax, and only 3 have a full wealth tax today, and that's Spain, Norway, and Switzerland. Others have a form of wealth tax on selected assets, such as securities in Belgium, and Holland and Italy too have a form of selective regime wealth taxes. France had got rid of those in 2017. So although they generate income, and my word, this government needs it, there are some significant downsides, and they often push the rich and their wealth out of the country, so that capital flight argument. And we saw that to some degree in 2017 following the non-dom changes. So I think wealth taxes tend to tax the capital rich, but often the income poor, and they are hugely unpopular. They're difficult to enforce, they're difficult conceptually, and they're difficult administratively. So we've got to think about this carefully. The government have to. It's not something they've looked at in earnest since the 1970s, but we have Lord O'Donnell's report, which is being carried out by the Institute of Fiscal Studies. It's a wealth tax project, and the preliminary findings will be reported in mid-October with a final report in December. But it's not just the public that find a wealth tax unpopular. The Conservatives do as well, and it would be extremely divisive at a time when Boris is dealing with ongoing Brexit division. So, in short, I think a wealth tax is unlikely. CGT and IHT changes more realistic, but one thing I do say to my clients is it's worth noting that CGT and IHT generate a total of less than 1% of the total tax revenue for the Treasury. It's highly politicised. It's linked to capital wealth. And we have seen Boris talking about levelling up and wanting to reduce the disparity between rich and poor. So are we on the brink of that? I don't know. Over to you, I have no crystal ball. But in terms of tax revenue and enforcement, do expect revenue to come down hard on invaders, aggressive avoiders, and casual non-compliance. They'll still be working very hard to protect their revenues.